Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This will be another walk through the front lines for today, 25th of October 2022. Lots is going on in lots of small ways, and I guess what I want to know is whether all these are coordinated attacks. So we're starting to see sort of movements in all different sort of areas of the theatre. So, we're starting to see stuff happening up here. We're starting to see stuff happening around here. Bakhmut, and of course, Kherson. And then talk about, amassing troops in Zaporizhia area. And even a little bit of activity down here. And the question is this all coordinated, or is this just like luckily happening at the same time? You'd assume that it would be coordinated, but not necessarily so. We've been waiting for some time for there to be movement, and it seems like things are starting to happen. Anyway, before we get to that, what else has been happening? There's been a bit of a lull in attacks at the energy infrastructure and sort of cruise missile S-300 and drone attacks. Does that represent anything, such as the Russians running out of munitions? It could well do. There's been some interesting revelations, I suppose. Bellingcat has put on Twitter that they know exactly who is sort of programming these missiles, and they've done a whole heap of research. And I'll maybe talk about that in a future sort of extra video. But yeah, that's interesting. Now, there have been a couple of repelled attacks in the Kharkiv Oblast from the Russians, around about here and around about here, I think. So they've been repelled by Ukrainians. That's been happening, most days for the last week, and it's trying to work out exactly what they're doing. Just, I guess, get the Ukrainians to direct some of their attention elsewhere to alleviate the forces on the front line in the Kupiansk area, possibly. Okay, so let's have a walk around the front line and see what we can find out. What has been going on? So we are going to look at the Kupiansk area here. So Kupiansk, just to give you a sense of where we are, this is Kupiansk, and this is Svatove. So if we go to our nice colourful map here, we have Kupiansk down to Svatove, and then we'll do Svatove to Kreminna. So Kupiansk to Svatove, Kupiansk up here, Svatove there. And there has been some movement. The Ukrainians are basically pressing. They're not making huge amounts of territory, but they are definitely on the offensive now. There's been a bit of a stall with the Russians sort of trying to attack around northeastern Kupiansk. If you remember, they took a village, Horobivka, just here. But nothing has happened since then. The Ukrainians have been building up their defences. I pulled the Ukrainian lines a bit back behind Vilshana and see this as a grey area. Sorry, grey zone. So not a lot of news is coming out of that area. However, it does seem to be happening down towards Orliansky and further south as they are pressing towards Svatove. But yeah, there's talk of sort of little villages being taken here and there, fighting around Berestove. And the Ukrainians apparently have been sort of repelled around here, but they are attacking, sort of thing you'd expect, really. And as we move towards Svatove, there's been a few villages that have swapped hands. So Myrsozharivka is definitely now in Ukrainian hands, and if we come further down south, we have Karmazhnivka and Novovodyani are both definitely now in Ukrainian hands, apparently. So this is a move. So here's Svatove. So we have a move down the south of Svatove and move sort of northwest of Svatove. There's just like consistent pressuring of the lines, it appears, up and down this front towards the P66 highway and from the Kherson River area. So if you remember, you've got the Kherson River, you've got the P66 highway coming down here. In fact, let's make sure we've got that on. I don't know why default turns it off. Let's get that layer there. So we have everything. So now you can see that you have Svatove, Kreminna, P66 highway, Krasna River, Cherobets River, and the Oskil River. There's just this move you can see as I've left the red Russian lines where they were yesterday and shown you the blue lines and even the day before. And there's this move towards Popivka down here and the attack that's been happening. Apparently they're still fighting around there. So we're unsure where the lines actually stand. And this whole grey zone between Kreminna and Tursky and Terney, and Zarichny. But apparently there are Russians say that they have repelled attacks towards Kreminna, and there are attacks towards Svatove. At the same time, there are HIMARS attacks apparently all over this region. You know, Starobilsk, all behind the lines here. The Ukrainians are continuing to hit targets. What those targets are exactly, I don't know, but it's likely to be depots. Full of munition, command and control, all those kind of things that the Ukrainians have shown themselves quite adept at hitting. Okay, so we can move down this. That annoys me. Sorry. Let's move down the front line towards Kreminna. So here is. Oh, come on, Google. Here you go. So Kreminna, Rubizhny, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk. There have been repelled attacks out of Bilorivka now. So the way I understood it, a couple of days ago, the Russians were hitting Bilorivka and moving towards that. And now there are some reports that the Ukrainians are striking towards Lysychansk from Bilorivka. So again, exactly what's happening, who knows? Look, there's another Berestove. Seem to be lots of these similarly named place names. Okay, some fairly big news around Bakhmut. And this is that there has been a counterattack, and we have seen the Ukrainians hit back at the Russians. And there are these sort of factory cement plants and asphalt plants and whatnot here. Now we have got visual confirmation that, so where are we? So here's the Bakhmut area. This is the war map. We've got Solidar and Bakhmutsky just north of them. We've got Ivangorod, Opitny just down south, and Ondradivka. And there have been sort of a hit back from the Ukrainians all along that line. We have visual confirmation that the Ukrainians have recaptured the concrete plant. Lots of talk about this online, and lots of discussion about what this means for the Ukrainians. There are some claims, and people like Defense Politics Asia are being quite guarded about what's going on here. I've heard from someone literally on the ground in Bakhmut who's contacted me to say that, broadly speaking, the Ukrainians is contesting this this junction here, this crossroads, and it seems like they are, although there will be elements of this being a grey zone, they have liberated the plants here. Now, what's interesting is that the Russians took about 2 months to take this area and to control this area, and the Ukrainians have done a concerted counter-offensive and have got it back within 2 days, which I find quite interesting. And then if we come further down here, you've got Opitny and Ivangorod, and I have moved the Russian line, I've moved the Ukrainian line to back towards this road. If you remember, there's a place called Klishkivka here that the Russians were moving towards to try and do their encirclement of Bakhmut, where they only really had a third of Bakhmut encircled, which is here, and 2/3, of course, not, which doesn't really make a very good encirclement. And the Ukrainians have pushed right back, and there might be, claims about what's going on in Ondradivka. And this was, of course, kind of their launch area, the Russians' launch area for this pincer movement and encirclement, but they appear to be pushed right back. Quite how far back and whether Vizela Dolina, some accounts will say that is now a bit of a grey zone. So this is what Defmon says. So here you see Vizela Dolina is a grey zone. So the Ukrainians have pushed back, and Opitny and Ivangorod are now in their hands, and they're pushing out further towards Zaitsevi. So if we have a look at that on our map here, We've got Zaitsev here. We've got a Pitney here. So this is the claim from Defmon. So I will agree with that because he generally uses geolocated evidence for that, and the pushes towards Zaitsev as well. So it could look something like that, which is wow. I mean, if you're thinking that's all just really happened in a day, 2 days, really, that's a fantastic achievement for the Ukrainians here. Now they are they have been under so much pressure for the last sort of month plus, but they have had reinforcements and they are a pretty useful fighting unit as well in Bakhmut. What I can also say, a few things I'm going to say about what's going on here from someone I know on the ground, and I'm fairly trustworthy of this person. Of course, it's really hard to be able to confirm everything they're saying and they are who they say they are. But I'm, pretty honoured that they've reached out to me to give me some information on what's going on in Bakhmut. There is a bridge, the central bridge that has been sort of bombed here, and there's now a makeshift bridge to replace that. There is higher ground over here that the Russians are using. So this is sort of this area, I believe, is on slightly higher ground, and that is now allows the Russians to have like um, sniper access or the ability to see and use their mortars to pin people down in this area of Bakhmut, in the eastern areas of Bakhmut. Um, what else can I say? The crossroads. As he says, this is a crossroads you've aligned your lines to. This is where it's been for a while, but they tried to push down to the plant here. So this is a crossroads, and the attempt to push down to the plant. But of course, he says this is how it's been for a while. But there's been it's all seems to have been happening the last couple of days. They're pushing in, but they've also been pushed out regularly. The Russians, I presume, rather than the Ukrainians. Talks about high ground. He says morale for the Ukrainians is high, but they are cautious, extremely hesitant about us. So these guys are people who go in, and I'll give you a link to them later, are people who go in and provide humanitarian aid and evacuate civilians. Okay, so that's what this guy's doing, and they're working in Bakhmut and lots of towns up and down this line. And he's saying, this is exactly what he said to me, but we have to get residents out. Residents are happy when they get help, but ultimately sad too. Most just having a feeling of being lost. We've even evacuated residents that were awaiting the Russians, but ultimately got tired of being under fire from the Russians. They were cursing us the whole way to the evacuation train, but happy happy that they were safe. So of course, not everyone in Bakhmut is pro-Ukrainian. It seems there are people here who are pro-Russian and waiting for the Russians to take the place, but then have eventually said, okay, we need to be taken to safety. He said that there are a ton that want to stay, but with the winter won't have much hope. Keep aid in safe villages and pushing for evacuating to these areas is best. By giving aid when we enable them to stay then we enable them to stay in a hot zone. Without continued aid, then several will not make it to the spring. It's a rock and a hard place. We do what we can. I mean, it's amazing work to have people volunteering on the front lines to do this kind of stuff. And to evacuate citizens and provide humanitarian aid. There are literally people still trying to live in Bakhmut, and so much of it is rubble, so much of it's been hit, but they kind of go around to try and do their daily business, and it seems insanity, but they've got nowhere else to go. And quite often you'll find in these places, these towns that have been liberated or are on the front line, the people who are left are the most vulnerable. They talk about this quite often in Ukraine, the latest podcast. Um, it's always the vulnerable that are left behind, the old and the infirm, and people who just have nothing else. The people who have the ability and the money, they get out quickly because they have the capability to do so. So that's always an interesting observation to make. But it's very it's useful to have someone on the ground who can give me up to date information and see how it correlates with other information I've been given from other sources or have gleaned from other sources. But definitely the Ukrainians are pushing back in Bakhmut, which is good for the Ukrainian side, obviously. If we go sort of further down and we talk about Donetsk and Avdiivka, again, not much to report from there. Um, oh, this goodness me, I've got so many boxes on here that it's annoying. So yeah, we've got the Pisky moving slowly towards Pervomaisky, but Avdiivka up here is still holding out. I don't know of any sort of counterattacks or anything going on there. I think this is just more of the same. And then as we come down, there is various fighting in this corner. I talked yesterday about the Ukrainians moving towards Stepney. I haven't heard anything else since then, but I will do a little bit of research today, see what's going on down in this corner. And we move along the Zaporizhia front line here towards Zaporizhia and towards Kherson. And again, what is going on in Kherson? Well, it's quite difficult to know at the moment because there is such tight operational security. So eh, all I can try and glean is that there have been some movements on the Ukrainian sides further south, but this could just be a large grey zone. As you can see, this is where the red line was sort of 2 days ago. We've got this move towards Milove, but I haven't heard anything since then from around Milove. Chervony Yar, again, it's all just creeping south. Some of these lines appear to be going south. And yesterday there was this move towards Chkalove and Cherivne. I haven't heard anything else about that, but I just have seen some lines that have been drawn further south here. So I've moved the Ukrainian line down there. Now, people like Defmon have said, I haven't heard anything about Kherson, but I have heard that there are 500 um, reinforcements being sent for the Russians to Kherson. So that's interesting. Don't know what that tells you. If it depends whether they are just merely mobilized troops or if they are anyone else. Also, there is a claim that around here we have the claim that the Russians have mined this, marine mines. So this part of the river here is mined in case you would think of an amphibious landing. They are worried about that. They know that the Ukrainians have been training and they have capability to do this. Of course, this is quite a long river. There are many options for an amphibious landing. It could happen anywhere along. Well, anywhere along here. Of course, you then get to the dam. But there are options all the way up to the kind of reservoirs. So some big news is that 3 helicopters were shot down, 2 of them within half an hour of each other in the Kherson region. Not sure exactly where. However, here is footage of one of them being hit down by manpads. Yes! 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 Sorry, that's loud in your ears. That's the excitement of someone using a manpads to take down one of the best fighting helicopters in the world. So he's certainly happy with that. So for the Russians to lose 3 of those, I mean, the sheer, again, as I always say with these things, it's not just the monetary value of these units, but that is a huge hit. I mean, to replace that is super expensive. But it's if the pilots died or were captured, it's the loss of the expertise. So it's like, yeah, you can have some extra helicopters, back at base. But if you've got no one to fly them, if you've lost those pilots, you have lost the capability of those being used, as well as losing the ones you have. So this is a huge hit. 3 in one day, 2 in half an hour, is massive. So there you go. There is movement going on. So here's one map from Noel, one of the sources I use, showing the Ukrainians making slow but steady advances in Kherson, but with the understanding that there is tight operational security around there. Okay, so there you go. Those are the front lines. Things will be moving today, and I've probably got some things inaccurate, some things wrong, because it's the fog of war. It's difficult to know exactly what's going on. It's just really interesting that different people who do the same kind of thing as me, that I also watch all of their channels to find out what's going on and try and aggregate my data, everyone's saying different things, and some people are denying, say that the Bakhmut cement factory is taken over, and then there's like evidence, visual evidence that it was, and it's like, okay, it has been, but maybe not this much, and then everyone's saying different things. Um, that's my account of what's going on. Just to go a little wider, just as a last thing, because I'm going to be, my extra video today will be an interview of Tim White, who's a Ukraine expert. So please come and join me at 12 p.m. So midday UK time, 5 hours after that. So that'd be what, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time. So sorry about that. Um, so Azerbaijan officially sides with the Ukraine. Today they called Russia an occupier, aggressor, and condemned Moscow for crimes against humanity in Ukraine on national television. They also threatened Iran with the separation of Azerbaijanis from Tehran's rule. Okay, so they're really geopolitically aligning themselves with Ukraine and their allies and against Russia and Iran. Um, and on Iran, Israel the other day has hit a drone factory in Syria. So this is a drone factory that has apparently been providing um, either components or drones for Iran. And Israel, this whole talk about where is Israel placed in this, what are they doing to help? Well, it's interesting that they've helped Ukraine by doing something in their own sort of backyard type thing, or in their own conflict they're having with Syria. They've hit an Iranian drone factory that will essentially help the Ukrainians. So that's pretty good news for the Ukrainians there. Anyway, that's probably all for now. So much more to talk about and say as ever, but I'll keep it to this. Things are happening. The next few days or next week, I think, is going to be fascinating to see as far as how far-reaching these counter-offensives of the Ukrainians are, how coordinated they are, and whether there are other things going on. Like I keep talking about, well, are they going to hit down from Zaporizhzhia to Melitopol or to Mariupol? What's going to go? Oh, one final thing to say about Kherson is that there is evidence now that the Russians are actually fortifying Kherson, so they might not be pulling out of the city of Kherson, or even if they are doing some kind of operational withdrawal, but it could be to defend the city and keep hold of the city. They have taken down some statues there and nicked a bunch of valuables to take over the other side. Is that to protect them, given a future sort of battle for the city? Are they intending to hold on to the city? I don't know. Interesting. We shall see. Rather than completely pull out of the west of the Dnipro River. And just to let you know, this is Global Augmentation Group, and they are doing what looks to be great work in Bakhmut and other areas in Ukraine. They've done sort of relief work for Hurricane Ian, but back in the States. But here they are in their Ukraine operations. Lots of really positive stuff that these guys appear to be doing, helping to evacuate, helping with humanitarian aid all over the region. There you go. That's Global Augmentation Group, and I'm pretty sure you can support them. And look into the work they do, and even volunteer for them. Anyway, thanks to them for reaching out. Thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. There are other ways to support my channel down in the descriptions below. Buy me a coffee. It's always really gratefully received, or anything like that. But thanks for being with me here. Take care, and I'll speak to you or see you later in my interview with Tim White at 12.